we'll take the suite. You're paying, right? My mother-in-law announced, her tone more like a command than a request, as my parents and I checked into the hotel. Jason just smiled awkwardly and my stomach tightened. Mom's right, he added quickly. They should be comfortable. It was in that moment my father's voice cut through the air, carrying the kind of weight that silences a room. Just so you know, he said evenly, that day is still vivid in my memory. A bright, cloudless Tuesday, the first time I met Jason's parents. I remember the butterflies in my stomach as if it were yesterday. Jason and I had been together for 2 years, freshly engaged, and despite hearing countless stories about his family, I had never met them in person. He always said they were traditional, but I never understood the full gravity of that word until I came face to face with the Adlers. We agreed to meet at a quaint little cafe. I got there first, sitting by the window in my favorite blue dress, determined to make a good impression. Jason walked in soon after with his parents. His mother, Alice Adler, carried herself like a queen, surveying her court, her eyes sharp, calculating. His father, Robert, barely looked at me, his disinterest written across his face. Lillian, these are my parents, Robert and Alice Adler, Jason said, his voice filled with a hopeful brightness I couldn't quite share. It's lovely to meet you both, I said warmly, forcing a smile. Likewise, Alice replied, but her gaze swept over me, dissecting me piece by piece. Jason says you're a lawyer. Where do you work? Her bluntness hit me like cold water, but I kept my composure. Johnson and Partners downtown. Robert finally looked up. And your salary? Must be good being a lawyer. His tone was sharp, invasive. My throat tightened. It's adequate, I said carefully, trying to deflect. Alice raised a brow. And where do you plan to live? After the wedding? I glanced at Jason, silently pleading for him to step in, but he only shrugged. We're still discussing that? I answered quietly. Robert leaned forward, his stare heavy. And your parents? What do they do? They ran a small business, I replied, feeling cornered. Alice snorted, almost amused. A small business? Well, let's hope they can contribute something decent to the wedding. A knot formed in my stomach, and Jason noticed, but said nothing. Instead, as the waiter came, Alice criticized the menu prices, Robert nodding in approval, as though everything was a transaction to be measured. It felt less like meeting family and more like an interview I hadn't applied for. Deep down, I knew this was the first of many red flags. The calls began soon after. Random, demanding, invasive. Each ring of my phone felt less like a connection and more like a chain. One evening, as I was packing up at the office, my phone buzzed. Lillian, dear, Alice's voice dripped with entitlement. I need you to look over some legal papers for us. It's just a small favor. I exhaled sharply. I'm just heading out. Can it wait? Oh, it'll only take a moment. For family. She pressed stop. I caved. The next day it was Robert asking me to set up his new television because Jason was busy. Their favors morphed into obligations, their calls into interruptions that chipped away at my peace. Jason, I finally said one night, frustration spilling out. Your parents call me constantly, legal advice, errands, even tech support. It's too much. He didn't even look up from his phone. They're just being friendly. That's how they are with everyone. Friendly? I echoed, my voice trembling. They're overwhelming me. They're harmless, Lillian, just trying to bond. I felt the ground slip beneath me. His indifference cut deeper than their demands. The final straw came during a dinner invitation at a lavish downtown restaurant. My instincts told me it wouldn't be a simple family meal. I was right. The Adlers were already seated, scanning the menu as if plotting a strategy. You must try the lobster, Alice insisted, her voice dripping with false enthusiasm. I glanced at the price, my pulse quickening. Before I could protest, Robert leaned in. Jason tells us you're doing well at your firm. Surely a successful lawyer like you can afford a little indulgence. I swallowed hard, forcing a smile. I was actually thinking of something lighter. Maybe a salad. Alice's eyes widened in mock disbelief. A salad? At one of the finest restaurants in the city. Don't be ridiculous. Her words stung, not because of what she said, but because Jason sat there silently choosing comfort over confrontation. As always, I forced a polite smile and picked up my food, choosing not to argue. The last thing I wanted was a public scene. Throughout the meal, the conversation revolved almost entirely around Jason, his achievements, his future, his prospects, while the questions directed at me felt more like filler than genuine interest. They barely waited for my answers before redirecting the spotlight back to him. Then came the moment of truth. The waiter laid the bill discreetly on the table, but Robert Adler reached for his pockets with theatrical hesitation. Oh dear. He murmured, his voice far too calm for a man who had just devoured lobster and steak. I think I left my wallet at home. Alice's gasp was perfectly timed. Robert, really? How could you be so careless? I don't have mine either. I turned to Jason, hoping for him to step in, but he only offered a half-hearted shrug. I guess I forgot my card too, he muttered. My chest tightened. This wasn't forgetfulness, this was orchestrated. With heat rising in my cheeks, I slid my card to the waiter. Alice smiled, sweet as poison honey. Thank you, dear. You're such a lifesaver. As we walked out of the restaurant, anger simmered beneath my skin. Was this who I was to them? A convenient wallet? And Jason's silence, his passive complicity, cut me more deeply than his parents' etche-me-less estat. As the wedding drew closer, it became unavoidable. Our parents had. To me, I rehearsed the conversation with my mom and dad for days, pacing my living room like an anxious child about to confess a secret. Finally, I dialed. Mom, Dad. I think it's time you met Jason's parents, I said, forcing steadiness into my voice. Oh, Lillian, we've been waiting for this. When? My mom answered, her excitement bubbling through the line. I hesitated. Just so you know, they're a little intense. Dad chuckled, calm and confident. Lillian, we've dealt with all sorts of people. Don't worry, we'll manage. His assurance was a balm, but deep down my dread remained. We chose the Grandview Hotel, a familiar place of elegance and calm. I hoped its charm might soften the inevitable friction. The morning of the meeting, I dressed carefully in a modest but elegant outfit, my nerves wound tight. Jason, as always, seemed unfazed. It's just lunch, Lillian. Relax, he said, scrolling casually through his phone. His indifference made me feel even more alone. The Grandview shimmered in the afternoon sun as we walked through its glass doors. My parents rose from their seats in the lounge, their faces glowing with warmth. Mom hugged me tightly. Dad's hand rested on my shoulder with quiet strength. Then Jason's parents arrived. The air shifted instantly. Alice's eyes darted around the lobby, as if cataloging every chandelier, every painting, every carpet. Robert's handshake with my father was limp, his dry tone void of sincerity. Nice place you've picked, Lillian. Thank you. We thought it would be lovely for everyone, I replied, summoning a brightness I didn't feel. Before we could even sit for lunch, a hotel employee approached, his expression apologetic. I'm terribly sorry, but we're overbooked today. We only have a few single rooms and 2 triple rooms available. One is our luxury suite with full amenities. The other is more basic, near the road. Alice pounced before I could react. Well, obviously, Robert, Jason, and I will take the suite. Lillian, you don't mind covering the cost, do you? After all, you organized this. My jaw slackened. I will. Actually, I was thinking my parents and I could take nonsense. She cut me off sharply. We're the guests. And besides, you're the one with the big lawyer's salary. I felt heat rising in my chest, but before I could respond, my father spoke gently. Why don't we all sit down for lunch first and decide afterward? The meal that followed was anything but peaceful. Conversation limped along, every remark from the Adlers laced with subtle mockery. My parents, ever composed, met each barb with humor and dignity, but I could see the strain behind their smiles. When the subject of rooms resurfaced, Alice's insistence hardened. We should get the suite. It's only proper. Lillian can't afford it. Jason, who had been silently nibbling his food, finally spoke. Mom's right. They should be comfortable. The words hit me like a slap. Was he really choosing them again over me? My mother, always seeking peace, suggested gently, why don't we let the hotel staff decide? Assign rooms as they see fit, but Alice wouldn't yield. She leaned forward, her voice sharp as glass. Your family runs a small business, Lillian. I imagine you're not used to luxury. The simpler room will suit you fine. It's meant for people with smaller incomes. The insult burned. It wasn't just about rooms. It was about worth, about respect. And they had none for us. That's when my father, Ezra Williams, cleared his throat. His voice was calm, but carried an authority that silenced the table. There's something you all should know. We all turned to him, curious, confused. This hotel, he said evenly, along with several others across the country, belongs to our family business. The room went still. Even Alice's perpetual smirk faltered. The reaction was instant, sharp enough to cut the air. Alice's mouth fell open, Robert's eyes widened, and Jason's expression twisted into disbelief. You own this hotel? Alice stammered, her voice trembling between shock and awe. Yes, my father replied evenly, his calmness deliberate, and several others. We've never seen the need to flaunt it. The hotel manager, now visibly flustered, hurried over. Mr. Williams, I deeply apologize for the earlier inconvenience. Had I known, Dad raised a hand. It's fine, but the suite goes to us. Jason's family can have the other room, and there's no need for Lillian to cover anything. The words hit the Adlers like a blow. Alice's mask slipped, then quickly reassembled into something grotesquely sweet. Her voice oozed with false warmth. Ezra, Michelle, what an absolute delight. What an incredible surprise. You must be so proud. Jason finally broke his silence, turning to me with newfound eagerness, his eyes bright in a way that made my stomach sink. Lillian, this changes everything. We should move the wedding up, don't you think? I scanned their faces, plastered smiles, forced charm, opportunistic hunger. It was too much, too fake. My decision crystallized in that instant, actually. Jason, I said, my voice steady though my heart thundered, there isn't going to be a wedding. I'm calling off the engagement. The words seemed to echo, heavy and final. Alice's smile faltered, Robert's jaw tightened, and Jason's face crumbled. I can't be part of a family that only measures people by their wealth and status. I continued, my tone resolute. Then I stood, turning away from them all. Walking out of the performance they called family, behind me I heard the hurried scrape of shoes Jason's footsteps. Lillian, wait, please. We can work this out, he begged, desperation threading his voice. I spun on him, a surge of determination rising within me. Work out what? Your parents' cruelty? Your silence every time they humiliated me? Jason, you chose to stay quiet. That said more than words ever could. Before he could reply, Alice stormed toward us, her face twisted in rage. Ungrateful girl, she spat. After all we've done for you, my disbelief burned hotter than my anger. Done for me? You've disrespected me and my family from the start. Her voice rose, venom spilling unchecked. Stupid girl, you think you and your little business family are better than us? Jason stood between us, torn and trembling, but mute. Then my father's voice cut through the chaos like a blade calm, commanding, absolute. That's enough. Even. Alice froze. I think it's time you leave our hotel, Dad said firmly. You can't make us, Alice hissed, but her bravado faltered. Dad didn't flinch. Staff, please escort Mr. and Mrs. Adler out. They are no longer welcome here. Polite but firm, the employees closed in. Alice hurled insults over her shoulder as she and Robert were guided away, her words growing smaller with distance. Jason lingered, eyes heavy with regret. Lillian, I didn't expect. It's too late for sorry, I interrupted, my voice steady now. Your silence told me everything I needed to know. I turned and walked away. His mother's shrill protests faded into nothingness. Behind me, replaced by the rush of my own heartbeat, sadness washed over me. Yes, but alongside it came relief, a release I hadn't realized I was craving. Ending things with Jason hurt, but clinging to him would have been far worse. The days that followed were a storm of emotions, grief, freedom, exhaustion, and a strange lightness I hadn't felt in years. One evening, sitting on my porch, my phone buzzed. Sweetheart, how are you holding up? Mom's voice was soft, full of concern. I gazed at the sunset, painting the horizon. It's hard, I admitted, but it feels right, like I finally chose myself. You're stronger than you realize, Lillian, she said warmly. We're so proud of you. Gratitude swelled in my chest. I don't know what I'd do without you and Dad. Her voice softened. The end of one story is just the beginning of another, sometimes the better one. Her words struck deep, settling into the part of me that had been afraid. She was right. I threw myself into work and surrounded myself with friends who reminded me of my worth. Over coffee one afternoon, Jenna leaned forward and said, You did something most people wouldn't dare. You stood up for yourself. I smiled faintly, stirring my cup. It was hard, but I realized I can't stay in a place where I'm not valued. She raised her glass. To new beginnings. To self-respect. I clinked mine against hers, the sound small but powerful, like the opening note of a new song. Weeks later, I began planning a solo trip, something I had always wanted, but never had the courage to do. Packing my bag, I felt excitement buzzing in my chest. This was my story now, my journey, not defined by someone else's name, wealth, or approval. For the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of being alone. I was free, open to whatever came. Next, walking forward with hope, with strength, with an uncheckable sense of my own worth.